Hello everyone, welcome to week 9 of EPM 4355, that's a 14,001 standard class. And this week we're going to talk about performance evaluation. Well, as you can see, we are in the check phase of our Plan, Do, Check, Act framework. We've already talked about what we're going to do. We've established some leadership guidance, set out some plans, developed the support and defined the operations we need to make things happen within the EMS. Now we're focused on the second part of performance evaluation, figuring out whether or not we're actually achieving what we set out to achieve. This week we have two main topics, internal audit and management review. These are the two primary processes that get to evaluate performance throughout the organization and performance of the EMS. We're going to look at some internal audit key definitions, describe the role of internal audit, review the 14,001 internal audit requirements, and then look at some formats for documenting internal audits. In terms of management review, we're going to go through the same structure. We're going to look at some key definitions, describe the role of management review, review the actual requirements from 14,001, and then look at some formats for documenting management reviews. So internal audit, what are some key definitions? Well, audits have been primarily done for many years in the financial arena, but this is, in the context of an EMS, this is what is referred to as a systems audit. So it's a systematic, independent, and documented process for obtaining audit evidence and evaluating it objectively to determine the extent to which the audit criteria are fulfilled. And an internal audit is conducted by the organization or by an external party, so this could be one of the processes that was outsourced. We covered outsourcing earlier. An audit can be a combined audit, combining two or more disciplines. This is where we talked about evaluation of compliance, and this is a decision that management can make based on the resources available and the knowledge, skills, and abilities of the auditors. They can combine systems audits and compliance audits if you want, or you can do them as separate activities. And then independence can be demonstrated by the freedom from responsibility for the activity being audited or freedom from bias and conflict of interest. Generally, it's easier for auditors just to be free from responsibility for the activity. If not, it's difficult to define exactly how people are free from bias and conflict of interest. That can be much more tricky. Audit evidence is records, statements of fact, or other information which are relevant to audit criteria and are verifiable. And finally, audit criteria consist of the set of policies, procedures, or requirements used as a reference against which audit evidence is compared. And again, this is defined in ISO 19011, which you have a copy of. For the 14,001 standard, we can consider the audit criteria as being the shall statements within the standard. So whenever you see a shall statement, that's a likely area in which an audit can be performed. When there's a shall statement, something has to be done. So the question becomes, how do you do it? And then show me the evidence that it was completed successfully. Conformity is described as fulfillment of a requirement, and a nonconformity is non-fulfillment of a requirement. So the requirements, again, are the shall statements. Anytime you see a shall statement, then you know that is a requirement. In the guidance in the annex, there are certain areas that are covered. For guidance purposes, they're not specifically requirements, but within the actual standard itself, that's where the requirements are contained. That's what you would need to demonstrate conformance to in order to be certified to the standard. Internal audits have a couple of different functions. First of all, they verify that the management systems are functioning as intended. It's an independent verification that what management has planned to do, has provided support for, and designations for in terms of operational processes and technologies are actually working. And so it's someone else is going out there and saying, yes, things are working the way they're supposed to. Audits do three primary functions. They look at the development, implementation, and effectiveness of procedures and controls, which are the elements of systems. And so the three primary areas that are going to be picked up are a lack of development, lack of implementation, or a lack of effectiveness. And effectiveness, as we saw before, is defined specifically in ISO. Internal audits can also verify the alignment between policy and procedure, between a procedure and a work practice, and a work practice and records. And so what they do is look at these elements of the EMS and verify that a policy statement, where we need to go, what drives the EMS, what drives the organization's environmental performance, is reflected in activities. The prescribed activities are actually being carried out in work practices, and the evidence that they're being carried out in work practices is the records that are generated. Internal audits can also provide input to management decisions in terms of what needs to be done. Again, primarily what we're going to look at is maybe these systems or processes need to be further developed. They need to be further implemented, or maybe they're just designed wrong. They're just not effective. And the ISO 19011 standard provides detailed guidance for audit programs. So use that this week in your responses in the discussion threads, and use it as you move forward in your careers to understand how the audit function is supposed to be structured. So let's review some of the internal audit requirements. First of all, the standard requires that the organization, again, shall conduct internal audits at planned intervals, and the audits will determine a couple things. First of all, conformance. Is the EMS conforming to the organization's own requirements and then the requirements of the standard? Again, remember that every EMS consists of two things: what you have to do from the requirements of the standard, and then how management has adapted that to its own operations. And then the other two, in terms of what audits determine, are is the EMS effectively implemented and maintained? So these are very important questions. Over time, something that has been implemented could be working for a while, but it could not be maintained. And so this is an important area for audits to look at, because it gives a snapshot or a picture of what's going on out there in the organization. Again, the standard requires that an audit program be established, implemented, and maintained. And so the program has to have certain elements. It has to have defined frequency, methods, responsibilities, planning requirements, and reporting of its internal audits. What this means is that the entire EMS has to be reviewed on a regular basis. The methods or the procedures by which these audits are performed have to be described somewhere. The responsibilities for performing and reporting the results have to be defined. Planning requirements means that they have to be planned in terms of what's going to be looked at, and how the data is going to be gathered, and how it's going to be evaluated, and then how it's going to be reported. And so the standard does allow a little flexibility, because when establishing the internal audit program, the organization shall take into consideration the environmental importance of the processes concerned, changes affecting the organization, and the results of previous audits. So what they want to see is that the processes with significant environmental impacts and those that have been changed are high priority. They may be looked at more than once, perhaps in an annual audit cycle. They may undergo a more thorough or perhaps a more detailed evaluation. And if there are areas that just can't seem to get it right, and we keep seeing things going wrong, the audit schedule needs to look at the results of previous audits. And so the organization shall define the audit criteria and scope, select auditors and conduct audits to ensure objectivity and the impartiality of the audit process. That means that you have to have people that are objective and impartial and not part of the functional groups when possible. Ensure that the results of their audits are reported to relevant management. Again, this is based on what process you're looking at. And the organization shall retain documented information as evidence of the implementation of the audit program and the audit results. So the goal here is to provide documented information that show that the overall program is working. It's been planned out. The auditors have been assigned. They're doing what they're supposed to do, and audit results are being generated. This is one way to document internal audit results. You can see that these data elements are relevant. This is a good template for internal audits. The data elements are relevant to the requirements of 14,001. You would have to have the name, the person, the date, and their signature showing that they actually did it. Numberings for tracking. Major nonconformities and minor nonconformities. Majors would be the system that's not developed, implemented, or effective. Minor would be kind of the perhaps the degree of effectiveness or the degree of implementation that can be improved. And then there's a couple of questions that the auditors really need to consider. Is the company, Smith Corporation, making progress at meeting its IEMS or Integrated Environmental Management Systems objectives? Is the company really moving forward, or is this just a paper exercise? And then, is the policy being fully deployed? Remember, we looked at the alignment between different elements in the organization. And then some suggestions, perhaps, for improvement. These don't have to be actual corrective actions, because these audit results are going to go into the corrective action system, where the manager responsible for the area in which nonconformities are observed is going to develop a corrective action. But the auditor can make some recommendations. Here's another way to do it. Remember, we saw this earlier before in terms of monitoring and measuring. This is the same form. This form could be used for internal audits. This is the input into the corrective action system. And so again, we see here that this would assign someone and give a deadline, and then this also would include the actions taken, results, and date. So there's two types of forms. The first form could generate this form, and then this form would provide a record of the actions taken to correct any nonconformities. Management review is the second element of performance evaluation that we're looking at this week. So there are some key definitions that go into management reviews. The first is effectiveness, and effectiveness is defined as the extent to which planned activities are realized and planned results achieved. And performance, this is quite a good definition. Performance is a measurable result. And performance can either be quantitative or qualitative. And performance can relate to the management of activities, processes, products, including services, systems, or organizations. So the term can be applied widely, but in an EMS, the environmental performance is performance related to the management of environmental aspects. Again, we go back to the core of the environmental management system, which is the aspects of the products or processes that are being implemented. And so what we're focusing on managing is those aspects. And so for an environmental management system, results can be measured against an organization's environmental policy, environmental objectives, or other criteria using indicators. And the idea here is that the EMS is going to have to be particularly effective in terms of its policy, objectives, or other criteria, as shown by, first of all, the use of appropriate indicators and then actions taken on environmental aspects. So this is a different way of environmental management than the old end of pipe controls or compliance status. Management reviews are a strategic level review, and so they provide a very high level overview of the environmental management systems from an overall organizational standpoint. The review could take place over a period of time, can be part of regularly scheduled management activities like board or operational meetings. It doesn't have to be a separate activity, but it has to be clearly defined as part of existing activities. It's important to understand that relevant complaints received from interested parties are reviewed by top management to determine opportunities for improvement, because this is the linkage. Again, we have an open systems model. This is the linkage back into the external environment, into the environment as a whole. And so interested parties, when they complain, need to have their concerns acted on. And this is part of what's done during a management review. And there's three criteria that are part of the management review process in terms of looking at the EMS. First of all, they look at the suitability of the EMS. And this refers to how the environmental management system fits, its operations, its culture, and business systems. Is it too complex, too technical? Is it not technical enough? Is the scope appropriate? Is it really a good fit for how the company conducts business, or how the organization conducts its activities? Second of all, it's adequacy. Is the EMS meeting the requirements? In other words, are all the processes that are required by the standard developed, and then are they implemented appropriately? Are we doing things that make sense in terms of what the standard requires? And then effectiveness, this is the real kicker here, refers to whether the EMS is achieving the desired results, including environmental performance improvement. Are we really showing improved performance for reducing the negative impacts associated with our aspects, or reducing or eliminating aspects, and increasing positive impacts by perhaps shifting aspects out, or changing our product configuration so that certain aspects are no longer part of the activities, and newer aspects with more positive impacts are the result. And so these are the three primary criteria for management reviews. Is the EMS suitable to our organization? Is it adequate in terms of meeting the standard and being implemented? And is it effective? Does it really achieve what we're trying to achieve? Does it really help us to implement our environmental policy, or is it not really particularly effective at doing that? Are we spending a lot of money and not getting anything? Well, that's actually efficiency. What are we doing something, and is what we're doing getting us to where we need to be in terms of our policy commitments? Well, here's the management review requirements. Top management shall review the organization's environmental management system at planned intervals to ensure its continued, again, suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness. And there's certain elements that need to be on the agenda, and there needs to be evidence showing that these have actually been on the agenda. So first of all, the management reviews need to look at what the status is of actions that were decided on in previous management reviews. And then changes. What are the changes in these areas? Are there any changes in external and internal issues relevant to EMS and environmental management? Are there any changes in the needs and expectations of interested parties, and including compliance obligations? This is important because have the laws changed in terms of what is relevant to our organization? Are there any changes in aspects? And are there any changes in risks and opportunities? This is very important. This is where climate change comes in, because organizations would now be held accountable if they're going to implement 14001 and be certified, looking at the risks and opportunities associated with climate change and how those affect the organizational activities. Another element that they're going to look at is the extent to which environmental objectives have been achieved. And then a very important part is looking at information on environmental performance. This is where trend data and the analysis comes in, looking at trends in nonconformities and corrective actions, monitoring and measurement results, fulfillment of compliance obligations, and audit results. This is where we get an idea of how well we're managing our aspects and impacts, because this is where it's going to show up in these elements. We also want to look at adequacy of resources. Do we have enough people to really implement what we've committed ourselves to in the policy? Looking at perhaps relevant communications from interested parties, whatever, including complaints. This is very important that complaint handling be part of this. And then opportunities for continual improvement. And so what can we do to make things better? And when we talk about making things better, we go back to nonconformities. What really are we seeing here that hasn't worked? Or is our monitoring and measurement showing us increasing, decreasing performance? Are we drifting out of compliance, and are our systems working properly? So it's very important to provide evidence that these elements were actually addressed. So the standard requires that the outputs of the management review shall include conclusions on suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness of the EMS, and decisions related to continual improvement opportunities, decisions related to any need for changes to the EMS, including resources, perhaps too many in one area, or retraining or reallocating resources. Any needed actions when we haven't met our environmental objectives, have people just not been able to do what they're assigned to do for some reason, and any implication for the strategic direction of the organization. This is very important, because this is where things like climate change and adaptability strategies and adaptation processes come in. And the organization shall retain documented information as evidence of the results of management reviews. These would be records. So this is a nice, simple form for documenting management reviews. The date of the review meeting, who was there, the position was, what the conclusions were in terms of what's required to be recorded, actions to be taken, and persons responsible. Very simple. So that's it for this week's lecture. If you have any questions, ask them in the instructor office threads, or send me an email, leave me a voicemail. We'll see you online.